People will tell me, I looked out my sliding glass door and I saw a 5-foot white owl in my backyard. Something happened to them. Something came in their room or their home, or something stopped their car. I still have clients that have never met each other, and they will draw similar drawings of a craft or a being or whatever. One of my clients, I'll always remember this, he was, my gosh, in the medical field. He was describing being on the table, they were working on his head, which is very, very typical. And then he described these two beings. They were grayish with no hair, but taller than the other ones. And they were wearing capes. And they looked like Dracula type capes. And so I thought, oh my God, these people are crazy. I said, I never heard this. No, this is not going to work if you have a little box that you want to put everything in, because it makes you feel comfortable. This is not a comfortable subject. It scares people.
Okay, Yvonne Smith, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How is life treating you over yonder?
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being on, JP. I've been very busy. My work keeps me extremely busy. Every time I think about I'm going to retire, I get busier. So I know that's the universe telling me, nope, not yet. You can't retire yet. So, but it really says a lot when I'm getting new clients every week. At least one or two, sometimes more. So that's telling me that so many people still, and will need help with their contact experience.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you on the show, is to get the perspective of someone who deals with people who claim to be experiencers. And so first of all, I would love for you to just start out with a little bit about yourself, your background, your licenses, and then what actually is hypnotherapy, if you don't mind. The JP Touchette podcast is brought to you by Compadre. Love every walk. Do you have a strong and willful pulling dog? Well, not anymore. Compadre, the makers of the patented no-pull solution, have created a humane harness and leash system to help train against pulling and lunging behaviors. Compadre believes that you don't have to hurt a dog or break their beautiful spirit in order to get them to be good citizens on a leash. Gentle corrections around the strongest part of a dog's anatomy, the chest, means that you can guide and train your dog without painful pinch collars, e-collars, or choke chains. This system helps you to gain your dog's attention and lead them to walk calmly beside you. And if you use promo code JPT2025, you can get 10% off your order. And I can tell you from experience, you'll be glad you did. Seriously, guys, I have actually had a chance to try this myself, not on me, but on a big dog with a huge personality and a lot of energy. And this is a legit product that I actually believe in, and I believe in the owner's mission as well. This is an excellent company, and if you want to change the way that you are walking with your dog, this is the way to go. So if you want to see why dog trainers, pet owners, and vets love Compadre, then visit compadre.com. That's COMPAWDRE.com.
I started my practice I graduated from hypnotherapy college back in 1991. So I've been doing my work for 34 years now, which is unbelievable. Time has gone by so fast. In California, where I am located, there's no licensing right now for hypnotherapists. It's a certification process. So I became certified when I graduated in 1992. And now I'm moving ahead, but now starting in 2021, I'm now training therapists, traditional therapists, to do the work that I'm doing because it is greatly needed. This is a worldwide phenomenon. I can't do this forever. I wish I could, but I'm going to do this until I can't do this anymore. I'm getting older, and so I don't look forward to the day I have to slow down. But I have a class coming up in June, and I've been approached by therapists throughout my career at all these conferences that I would lecture at, and how do I do the work that you're doing? And at that time, in the beginning, I had no idea yet. I said, just you have to learn hypnosis and so forth. And now hypnosis, I like to dispel a lot of the myths, and I do this with all my new people because I'll tell you, probably 95% of my clients who come to me have never, ever been hypnotized for anything, not even stage hypnosis. So it's scary to some people. I like to dispel the myth that, I tell them I'm not going to control your mind. I'm not going to make you quack like a duck, when you're out and about somewhere. Um, it's a nice state of relaxation. And what happens is right now, JP, I'm talking to your conscious mind. So when I interview new people, I'm talking to their conscious mind. And our conscious mind makes up about 12% of our total mind power. So we take in so much when we're talking to people, we don't remember everything. And but what I do with the hypnotherapy, and I'm calling it regression, because I take a person back to that time and place when the incident happened. Now, this is not just a one-time experience. The person is abducted throughout their lives, as well as family members. It is a intergenerational experience. So many times I'll take a person back to very early childhood when the experience begins. Or I never plan a session. I will tell them, I want, you to decide where you want to start exploring. Sometimes people will have, or many times people will have a recent experience and they were so traumatized about it and they're having these dreams coming up that I will do the session maybe of something that happened a year ago or 6 months ago. So, but what I do is I set aside our critical area of mind. That's the part of the mind between the conscious and the subconscious. That's the part of our mind that says, oh, this is not real. I'm making this up. This is ridiculous. It's just all this questioning and doubting. Setting that aside and getting into the subconscious, which is the strongest part of our mind. And we're talking about the mind, not the brain. So with the subconscious mind, that makes up 80% of our total mind power. So it's very, very strong. And that's when, people will come to me in the very beginning, before I started specializing in the abductions, they wanted to come in to, basically quit smoking, lose weight, build up their self-esteem. I had, because I live in Southern California, I had actors coming to me. They had stage fright. They're afraid they were going to remember their lines, so memory enhancement. So it's like inside of our subconscious mind, we all have that little voice that says, oh, you could eat that chocolate cake, oh, you eat that bowl of French fries, it's okay. And that's that programming that I change with hypnosis. So all these negatives that are in our subconscious mind, and it's with all of us, I change into positive. So if they want to quit smoking, they have to be sure they want to 100% quit smoking for themselves and not for someone else. The same thing with losing weight, just changing your life script. And with the regressions, we see if I explain this to my clients when I interview them. that let's see if anything is registered in your subconscious in regard to, like, we go back to maybe 10 years old, or we go back to 6 months ago. And many times the experience is registered in there. The job of the subconscious mind is to protect us. So it will at times block off all of the experience of any trauma or parts of it. And I'm talking about, I've worked with people who were in terrible car accidents or have been sexually abused or, raped, just these terrible, whatever trauma it is, the subconscious job is to protect us. It is no different with alien abduction because something happened to people. They have no idea what it is, what happened, especially back when I go back to 1950s, when there was no internet, no books. So, and people had no idea what happened to them. So we see if there's something in whatever is in the subconscious and it's ready to come forward, it'll start coming forward. The subconscious will bring up bits and pieces of memory, so that the person will have a hint like, I know I saw something in the sky, or something came into my room that terrified them, but they don't remember anything after that. So that part haunts a person. I mean, I have clients coming to me that something happened to them 20, 30, 40 years ago. And with our internet, and sometimes the internet, has not been helpful because there's a lot of things, as we know, that are not true. But people are able to look up and, could this possibly have happened to me? All this time they thought, oh, I must be dreaming. I was probably dreaming, or I probably made this up. I don't know, but it's haunting them. And can you imagine if you lost an hour or two of time during your lifetime and you had no idea what happened? You don't know what happened. All you know is you got home and you look at the clock and you think, wait a minute, it cannot be 2 o'clock in the morning. I was just driving and it was 9 o'clock, things like that. So it's disturbing. And that's why they come to me to find out if something like this happened to them.
And so with hypnotherapy, is the process of hypnotherapy essentially just drowning out other stimuli so that they can go into the subconscious, as you say? Because I've heard, I think it is from John Blitch, that he was quoting Leo Sprinkle or David Spiegel, that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So like, what actually is that process of hypnosis that allows a person to go into the subconscious?
I'm sorry, you said, I didn't hear you well. You said all hypnosis is?
Self-hypnosis.
Oh, self-hypnosis. Okay. You can do self-hypnosis. I recommend it for relaxation, giving yourself positive suggestions, which we all need. But when people come to me, I become their facilitator. I do not recommend doing any kind of self-hypnosis in trying to explore what may have happened because they're by themselves.
Right. But what I was kind of asking is what is the action of the hypnosis? If that's a question that can be answered. Like, I've heard different explanations of it. Like, I understand why an abductee or a victim of a certain crime would come to a hypnotherapist such as yourself. But what is it that allows them to go into the subconscious? Is it the fact that the motions you're going through remove stimuli? How does that? What's the mechanism?
I just explain to them before, when they come in for their first session, I explain to them that I'm their facilitator. They're giving me permission to hypnotize them. So I tell them to just try to let themselves go, let themselves just listen to my voice, follow my direction. This is very safe. I don't use any kind of medication or drugs. And it's just a matter of allowing me to hypnotize them and allowing themselves to just let go. And that's why I explain about all the myths about hypnosis. I do that in the very beginning. And what I do is when they're ready, I have them lay down on the couch and I start with, it's called progressive relaxation, using my voice and having every part of their body, starting with their toes all the way up, having them visualize or imagine. Not everybody is visual. So I have them maybe imagine, maybe, think about this is what I'm asking you to do. Visualize, imagine every part of your body totally relaxing, sinking into the couch. That takes about 20 minutes, all the way up to the crown of their head. And then I use deepening techniques to have them go deeper after I count them down to 0. And then using those techniques, I tell them that they're not going to be unconscious or blacked out. They're going to hear me and they're going to hear themselves answer. But depending on how deep someone goes, and this happens all the time, that's why I tell people there is amnesia that happens during the session. But that is why I record everything, so that when they want their recording, some of them want to listen, some of them don't, but everything is in there. And so after we go through the relaxation, I count them down. I have them go to choose their favorite place where I say, JP, go to your mountains. And that's a place where everything is, they're feeling very safe and very calm. Leave them there for a while. And then I tell them, okay, we're going to take a trip. We're going to go back in time. You're going to be ready to remember. And so we'll go back, like I mentioned, back in early childhood or back a year ago. And then we see. I'll ask them questions. We'll see what comes forward. And it's very tedious because everyone's different. Sometimes in first sessions, I get floodgates opening because people waited so long and they want to know if something happened. Others it's chipping away at it. I call them blocks. They'll come up to something and then they're not sure if they want to continue. They say, I feel like there's a black curtain in front of me, or they'll say many times with abduction, I'm not supposed to remember, or I'm not supposed to tell you, things like that. But I use different techniques to get around those blocks. But I also tell people, if something comes up and it's very uncomfortable and you're not sure, if you want to continue, I will ask them, do you want to go on or do you want me to bring you out? And they have that choice. And when I tell them that, I think it makes them feel much more comfortable knowing that they don't have to, go right into the lion's den if they're not ready for it. So like I said, everyone's different. I never know how anyone's going to react. They do relive the experiences, and I tell them, but with a well-trained hypnotherapist in this work, they'll use different techniques to just report what's happening without feeling fear or pain or discomfort. What's important is to bring up information. Where were they? What happened? What are they feeling? What are they sensing? As I mentioned, everybody's different. Not everybody sees. Not everybody's visual. So I suggest to them that their senses all of their senses are heightened. So I have them feel around them, the area that they're in, because they'll tell me I'm not in my car anymore, or I'm not in my room anymore. But it's just, I wish we could get all the information in 1 or 2 sessions. That would make my job easier. But
Yeah.
it just depends. It depends on the person of how
Yeah.
it's going to go. But the more a person does this, they become conditioned to the feeling of hypnosis, and they know that they're safe, and they more and more they allow themselves to just, and they'll go deeper each time. So that's basically how the process works. During the regressions, I set aside 2 hours for everyone, because we sit down, I take notes at the beginning where they want to explore, then we get into the hypnosis, and then we start getting into the process of regression.
Okay.
And then afterwards,
And
we do the debriefing.
okay. Wow. Okay. So they're like a very, like a custodian along the way, or they're your guide along the way to make sure they're safe, they feel good. One thing I heard in my research about you is that you were mentored by Bud Hopkins. Is that correct?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
And just for
it's amazing.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, for context for the audience, Bud Hopkins was an artist in New York who trained in hypnotherapy and worked with people who were experiencers, and he was the one who introduced Harvard psychiatrist John Mack, who at first didn't believe in it, and then later on wrote several books about it, started to take them seriously. And I guess my question is, like, what are some of the things you learned from him? Because one of the skeptical-minded statements towards this whole thing, hypnotherapy on alien abduction, is that, these hypnotherapists, they're leading people into a certain avenue that they believe that this is what happened to them to begin with. And so I know that Bud Hopkins was very careful about that. Same with John Mack. And so what were some of the things you learned from them, and also of your own practice and experience, to make sure that you're being objective for this person who's coming in to figure out what's going on with them?
Oh, yeah. That's what's so important with this work. And that's why I want to train. That's why I am training therapists from really all over the world. I back in the early 90s, I had no idea at the time how fortunate I was to have met Bud. Although we were on opposite sides, he was on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. So when he would fly out to Los Angeles, he would stay with my family, and then I would drive him to whatever interviews he was doing and so forth. And so I talked about at the time I had graduated from hypnotherapy college. So he invited me to, when he was in town, to sit in on some of his regressions. So you don't learn this. You don't learn the regressions in hypnotherapy college. And I don't even know today, I doubt if they're teaching it in the colleges for abductions. But that's why I decided I have to do this. But in just observing him, how he posed the questions and how careful you have to be. You don't suggest to somebody that they see a blue white light. In other words, they'll, you say, okay, tell me, feel around you, look around you, use your senses. And then they'll say, I can't see too much as a really bright light that I may not able to see, ahead of me. And so if they'll say that, I'll go, okay, tell me if you can with the source of that blue, and I use the same words, blue, white light, you know. If they're describing, say they're inside the craft, they're inside the craft, and that's when I have them go, look around your car. Do you see outside your windows? In other words, and it takes a while, and they'll say, I'm not in my car. I can't see my car. So then I tell them, okay, describe your surroundings. If you're not, describe your surroundings. So I use the words, if they're saying I'm in a large room, and I'll say, okay, describe the large room. So you don't suggest, are you in a large room now? That sort of thing.
Here comes the big gray alien, and what does he say? You're not doing that.
I know I've heard nightmares over the years that some people had said they were very they were led and they weren't comfortable with it. Not often. I don't hear this often, but I've heard it, and that's why it was way before I started teaching my classes. But you use back, as I mentioned, the same wording that they tell you. If they say, I see, I see a face. I just see a face, and okay, describe the face. Where is the face? That sort of thing. I guess it's like one step at a time, and it's very tedious. And I tell by the classes, if you want to get into this, you have to have a lot of patience with it. But then again, we can get floodgates, and the person will start describing, oh my God, I'm not in my car. They're looking around, and that's when some of them get very anxious because they're thinking, I don't know what this place is type thing. They don't know where they are.
Right.
So I'm very careful. And then when over the years, we started with cassette tapes. That's how Bud started. That's how I started. And I would give a copy of the tape to my client, and many of them, because that, it was that big, I think it was the 90s when they were talking about therapists leading people to that they were sexually abused by a family member, or they were in a demonic cult, taken into a demonic cult, that sort of thing. And so, they talked about it on the news and all. And of course, you think, oh my God, they're just targeting us. And my clients would listen to their tape and they'd say, my God, Yvonne, you hardly say anything, because there's long periods where it's silent and I'm waiting for them to answer. So that's the thing is someone has to be very, very careful.
Yeah, that was one of the things when I was reading Abduction by John Mack was this, and because I'm so obsessed with the topic, I'm talking with my family members, and one of the things that does come up is this sounds like it could mask the memory of a family member abusing them, or this and that, and this is a masking of memory. So one thing I would love to ask is, given the fact that you're being objective with these people, you're not leading them into a certain avenue, like you just mentioned, describe your surroundings, do this, and you have many patients. What are the patterns that you notice across these experiences, and what would lead a skeptical person to believe or accept that this might actually be the other way around, that it's not masking a family member hurting them in any way?
Well, the advantage I have as a hypnotherapist is that usually I'm the last kid on the block they come see. They've been in therapy years. They've been given medication for years. And it's just really a Band-Aid with this, because there's still that area that is traumatizing them, and their therapist can't tap into this. The traditional therapist, it's changing, it's getting better. But when I started my practice early 90s, they didn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole at all. So when I started my practice, I began receiving referrals from psychiatrists or psychologists, because they said this might be your area because I can't seem to tap in. And my client and my patient said they with their family members saw a UFO many years ago and things like that. So the advantage I have is I don't have to start from square one. They've already dealt with the sexual abuse or whatever happened in their childhood or early years. I couldn't deal with that. I'm glad I'm a hypnotherapist. I would rather deal with alien abduction because I couldn't deal with a human family member doing this to a child. I can't deal with that. So they've dealt with it. They've had the medication, but still they're showing signs of PTSD. So then I get the person and you could go through the process of interview and so forth. And then I'll ask them specific questions. When do you remember seeing something in the sky? Or, you and your family, what do you remember? Or they'll say, I don't know what happened to 2 or 3 hours. I was with my family and nobody remembers. So, and back, way back, there was no point of reference to this. People didn't know what was happening. So that's where I can take that person after they've gone through all of their, years of therapy for the abuse. If the person, and it's very rare that somebody will come to me before they even deal with it. If the person has not dealt with the abuse, they know that something happened to them by their Uncle Sam or whatever, I refer them out. I don't start from that. I am not licensed to work with patients that have been abused that way. So I refer them out, and then, once you deal with that, it's like, I explain to them, it's like peeling the layers of the onion. You have to deal with what happened first with humans, before we could deal with this.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I think it's interesting to dip into this topic, because a good portion of my small audience is people who have suffered this condition called TSW, which is a condition caused by a medication that is not yet fully recognized. And so people have these horrifying experiences, but they don't feel like going to a normal doctor, taking this new medication. Yeah. Some people do find help with that, but a lot of us don't, myself included, that, the current system is not helping me, and not turning around and dealing with the problem, not facing the problem is just as harmful. And that makes sense to me psychologically. If you're talking about fear, if you're talking about a condition where you're suppressing what's really going on. And to me, that rings the same bell with these abduction experiences. Yeah. And so I guess that brings me to the question of what are the common sources of the PTSD for this experiencer? What causes a person? What are the things that traumatizes them so much?
It's the fact that something happened to them. Something came in their room or their home, or something stopped their car. And something caused them to not remember that they lost time. And it's that wondering about what happened. What happened? When you think about the PTSD symptoms, they have recurring nightmares, recurring dreams, and that's an indication from the subconscious telling the person there's an unresolved issue here. So they have the dream over and over until we get to the source, the cause of that. And just like with anything, with rape, with sexual abuse, as I mentioned before, the subconscious will block off all of it for a while, not forever, or part of it. So they know something happened. And then something could trigger, whatever it is, could trigger a memory. Maybe seeing a certain room, maybe and that's what say rape or a sexual abuse or a bright light all of a sudden they see, and that could be part of the UFO experience. So some things can trigger their memory. Will they start they'll remember more, but not all of it. And so that's what's very traumatizing. I have people not wanting to drive over bridges, and they don't know why. And some people don't want to drive certain parts of the freeway or the roads, or they're afraid of a certain part of their house. And that's what I have to dig in and see, okay, what's going on, what happened. And it just, it's a lifelong experience. So I have people coming to me all over 3 decades because we started, many times in early childhood, but things have been happening along the line, along their lives, and then something's happening to their children. So, as I mentioned, the experience just doesn't stop. It may lay dormant for a while, but then it'll pick up again.
Yeah, again, makes perfect sense and aligns with the stuff my community is going through. You might, something as simple as seeing some dust in the air because we're shedding off our skin so much, and it just takes us there. And we're not talking triggering. When we say triggering, we're not talking about like a microaggression here or something. We're like finding things, but actually like. And I used to kind of make fun of that stuff, admittedly, but until something serious happened to me and I had that experience where you just stop and it hits you. Anyways, I don't want to make this about me, but I'm just trying to relate to these people. And so what are... You're objectively bringing these people through their experiences. You've had many clients. You're not leading them. You're well versed in the literature of people studying it before. Have you? Here's an interesting question. Have you ever had people who don't know each other come together? Not come together, but you've had them as clients separately, but they corroborate each other's experiences?
Oh, all the time. All the time. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons I'm still doing this after 34 years, because I still have clients that have never met each other, and they will draw similar drawings of a craft or being or whatever. What happens I founded my support group, CERO, Close Encounter Resource Organization, 33 years ago. We started in my living room, and we would have people come in. A new person would come in, and then someone who's been a member for a while of CERO is at the meeting. They'll look at the new person. Oh, it's good to see you again. The new person will go, this is my first time here. And they're like, no, I've seen you. In fact, one time, one of them, the older member, thought, they almost got in an argument. You're lying to me. I know you were here before. I never forget that. And what happens is that familiarity with each other And I found over the years that because many of them have seen each other on a craft, and then they're here on Earth, and there's something so familiar with that person, but that one was so on target. Um, but it happens. Oh my gosh, it happens all the time. And now with Zoom. I mean, of course, I never knew I'd be working with people in other countries. It's the same descriptions. They're going through the same type of PTSD, and um, so that's when I mean, it was in the 90s when all the critics and the debunkers were all over the place. I did a lot of talk shows during the 90s, and there would be debunkers in the audience, and or doing a radio show. In those days, we would go into the studio and wear the headphones, and and I would get hit by the critics and debunkers. I don't mind a healthy critic, but a debunker, they just have their mind closed. They're not going to listen to anything. They've had their mind made up. And now I feel, oh my gosh, I don't have time to battle with these people. If they don't think this is happening, then it's their problem. I'm not. Yeah. It's not my job to convince anybody. When I've traveled to other countries and I've presented my slides in my presentations, and people in the audience will, some of them, they get PTSD again because they resonated with something in my presentation. And these are people, like I was in Italy, most of them didn't speak English, but here, they saw something that resonated and it triggered them. So, this is real. And that's why I've stayed in. If people were describing, if all the descriptions of their experience were all over the place, there was no similarity running through each case, I think, okay, I don't know, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. But when I start getting the similarities, and like you say, from people who don't know each other, never met, the emotions were the same. And most of these experiences start in early childhood. And even back then, they were just describing as kids what they remember, what they saw. So, I mean, I'm sorry if you don't believe this, whoever's going to listen to this. And it's not a belief system. That's the wrong term to use. But whether you believe it or not, I've told so many people this, whether you believe it or not, it's still going to happen. It's not, whether if you don't believe it, it's not going to happen or it's not happening. I don't know. You're not that important in the universe where, you're going to control that. I mean, this has been happening for, oh my God, many, many years. And you look at the early cases, Betty and Barney Hill, for instance, 1961, I believe. First, we know of first case of missing time that became public. They didn't know what happened to them. They were having PTSD symptoms. Like many people, they had physical indications that something happened to them. So, and it's happening now. People are coming up with overnight marks that they didn't have the night before. They can't explain it. So it's just there's so much to this, JP. Just so much to this.
Well, it's your job to be a hypnotherapist and to help people, and it's a scientist's job to be a scientist and to be objective. And I don't claim to be, the local smart guy or whatever. I'm not a scientist, but I know that science is a process. And if you come into it with bias, I mean, just recently there's this new documentary, Age of Disclosure, at South by Southwest. And one of the guys who was featured in the documentary was from NASA. And he said that people in NASA who were part of this UAP specific study team were threatened just for looking, and that he couldn't believe that in a place where you're supposed to be in a scientific environment, that such bias could exist. That's antithetical to science. And just in terms, when you say belief and stuff like that, I think this touches on the next part of this interview I'm really excited to ask you about. And so my brain works in analogies, and if you'll indulge me, I'll put forth an analogy on how I think about abductions. It's like, here's the analogy. I like to think, what if I'm a farm owner in New England, okay? And my daughter goes for a walk, and about an hour or so later, it's supposed to be a 15-minute walk, by the way, but an hour later, she comes back and she says that a mountain lion mauled her. Mm-hmm. And she's got marks on her, scratch marks. She looks traumatized. And I think to myself, this doesn't make sense because mountain lions do not live in New England.
I was just going to say, I was just thinking that.
Right. So, like, but my daughter is traumatized.
Yeah.
I know my daughter's not sick. She has a psychiatrist. She's been to the doctor. Why does she have marks on her? Why is she behaving in this way? Maybe I don't believe that a mountain lion did this to her, but I certainly have to take it seriously. Mm. And that's what John Mack was saying, is like, I don't not believe, I take them seriously because these are people who are of sound mind, in his words. And yeah, so I don't know what's going on, but clearly something is happening and they need help. And then the next thing that it just really grabs my curiosity is the thing that Mac was putting forward before he died in all these different talks, is like, okay, we have credible people of sound mind who are saying this repeatable thing is happening to them. They corroborate each other's experiences. They've been tested over to see if something else is going on with them, some different type of trauma, and it's not. It's only when we deal with what they say they dealt with that they get better. Okay, I take them seriously. So what? And he's like, not so what, but so what? Like, what is going on? Mm-hmm. Like, there's oftentimes I've read that experiencers will say that it's kind of their experience was in like a dream state. Mm-hmm. Not always, of course, or that they travel through tunnels of light, or that these beings will come through solid objects to be with them, I guess, if you want to put it in simple terms. And so his kind of focus was, as I'm sure you know better than I, that this phenomenon breaks the Western mind because it is crossing from spiritual, physical, into this kind of mishmashy type of state that the Western mind is not really well trained to think about. And so I was wondering your thoughts on that, like speaking with all these different clients of yours, like do you think you can put it in a box? Are there several different boxes? Like, do you know what I'm getting at?
I think so. I mean, I can't put this in a box yet because I don't know what's going on. The beings haven't told me what their agenda is. I always ask, please tell me so I can help people, because we still don't know. I mean, we think, okay, there's little grays and they take people and they go on the ship, but then something else will come up, something else will happen. And first I'll go, oh no, okay, I haven't heard that yet, but I put it on the back burner. And then other people will come in and I'm hearing it more and more. So as a researcher, I'm a hypnotherapist first and then the researcher second. My whole goal is to get people to be able to live a normal life. in this
Right.
while they have this abduction in their life, because it's not going to just stop. But okay, I lost my track. It was a good thought. Hold on. Now this is my age. When
Oh,
we
no
call it
worries. Well,
super
you were
moment.
talking about how your focus is as a hypnotherapist first. Your
And,
focus is to help them deal
yes,
with their experience because it's not going away.
right. And so, as a researcher, if you're going to do this work, you've got to keep an open mind. You can't just go, oh, this is not fitting in with what I think this is, or, so no, this person hasn't had these experiences. And I tell people, if anyone comes to you and says, I know what this is, I know where they're from, and this is what they're doing, and they have names for all of them, and I tell them, run the
Yeah.
other way, because
Yeah.
we still don't know. People, some people want to be gurus and they want to have all the answers, and we don't have all the answers. And so I have to, keep an open mind. I mean, I learned that very early on when one of my clients, I'll always remember this, he was, my gosh, in the medical field. And he was describing being on the table. They were working on his head, which is very, very typical. And then he described these two beings. They were grayish with no hair, but taller than the other ones. And they were wearing capes. And they looked like Dracula type capes. And so I thought, oh my God, these people are crazy. I said, I never heard this. So I just went on with made a note of it, went on with the regression. And in those days, I was lecturing with Bud Hopkins, John Mack, David Jacobs. And the best thing, and I was so fortunate because here I was, the rookie coming in. We would go to the bar at the end of the day at these conferences. I go, okay, I have a question. Have any of you heard of abductees describing taller beings but wearing a cape? And I was thinking, okay, they're going to laugh. John Mack, I remember, oh yeah, I've heard this all the time. And I think Bud, I think he carried his album of drawings, because I remember him opening that up and I saw one of the drawings with the beings, and I went, and that's what I learned. Do not block anything. Don't question it. Just take note of it. And now, of course, I have hundreds of those descriptions. So that taught me a lot. That taught me, no, this is not going to work if you have a little box that you want to put everything in, because it
Yeah.
makes you feel comfortable. This is not a comfortable subject. I mean, it scares people. So
Yeah. There's so many different things that and it's hard to have a definitive statement other than just the patterns of what's going on. And by the way, a space cape does seem supremely cool. That does seem like a cool fashion statement. I mean, I wouldn't blame a person for a space being for wanting to look like that, but that's just
yeah,
that's one of those things that's just like, but if you want to have a scientific mind about it, right?
yeah,
And yeah, the other thing that really gets me, as someone who's very interested in animals, you might see praying mantises behind me. I used to
oh,
have
on the
praying mantises
wall.
as pets.
Did you
Yeah.
draw those?
No, those are real mantises.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I used to have I don't like using the word pet, but I used to have a praying mantis. I used to care for one. His name was Peter. And
Oh,
dude, like it made me rethink everything about what I was told about animal sentience or their brain capacity, because he knew me, he recognized
yeah,
me.
yep.
I interacted with him. I got him to fly from hand to hand and different tricks and things like that. But anyways, that's not less about me and more about my question is about animals specifically. Obviously, John Blitch had his mantis encounter, which just like hit me in the back of the head with a hammer. But there are these experiences where people will have a fuzzy memory of, let's say, an owl or a deer or a squirrel. And there's several different ideas about what that is. Like, I think Blitch was saying that for him, he thinks of it as like, well, all of these animals have really big black eyes, like the stereotypical gray alien. And maybe that's what's going on. But other people take a more spiritual meaning to it, that you know, maybe they're trying to tell me something, or maybe this is a screen memory. And I was wondering if you could add some insight to that, because I'm sure that's come up.
Oh, screen memories happen all the time. And that's what gives me an indication that something probably did happen. Because people will tell me, a few cases, one of them said, I looked out my sliding glass door and I saw a 5-foot white owl in my backyard. And I'm like, you know, this is Southern California. I mean, we don't get 5-foot white owls. But these screen memories make sense to the person at that time. Like, oh, so when she said that, I went, you know, and even a friend of hers said, after, you know, years after, like, think about it. Was that, you know, another case I had was the longest time the woman thought she's driving. This was a missing time case. And she had to slow down because there was I guess she said 5-foot or tall white mouse in the road. I mean, so it's like, you know, mice are not 5-foot, 6-foot tall. So for many years, and these are so many, I know that they're programmed to think that's what they saw for a long time. And then later on, something triggers other memory and they'll think, or, you know, these days, of course, they're looking at the internet or they pick up a book and something triggers like, oh my God, I wonder if this happened to me. So these, you know, these screen memories are very, very interesting. I mean, owls are very prominent. You can imagine, you know, look at their eyes, like a deer staring in the bedroom window. Deers don't stare in a bedroom window. I mean, they're very skittish. And it just brings me back to the story you said about your little girl saying she was attacked by a lion. And I'm thinking, okay, there's no lions in, was it New England?
Yeah. So
that was a screen memory for her. But she came back with marks that, you know, weren't there. But no lion couldn't be a lion, but something happened because she has physical evidence. And you say you take her to the emergency room and they're, you know, she got all these scratches and they're bleeding. So something happened. She wasn't making anything up. So that could very well be, you know, one of the incidents that there was a screen memory there and this happened to a child in early childhood, like say she was 6 or 7 years old. That could have been her first incident, and then which followed her, you know, throughout her life. And as a father, I would ask you, okay, do you remember anything happening in your childhood? Did your mother or father say anything? Did your grandparents say anything?
Yeah. Well, that was just an analogy I made up. I mean,
but it just made me think about, you know, if somebody had said that to me.
Okay.
That's a screen memory.
Yeah. I thought you thought for a second I was like telling you a real story. I'm like, oh
No,
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 no.
no. But
But,
it just,
okay, phew.
when we're talking about abduction,
Yeah.
I thought if I heard that, I thought, oh, okay.
Right.
I would investigate further.
What is a screen memory? And like, is there an example you could give that doesn't have to do with abduction experiences so people can understand?
Um, well, sure. I mean, I've heard in when children were sexually abused, they thought it was something else or somebody else, and then they, of course, when they finally go to therapy, then it comes out where it was, it was an uncle or it was, but all these years they thought it was someone else or something else. But because I specialize in the abduction work, I mean, it's so prominent that these beings are able to put an image in the person's mind many times, and it's heartbreaking when I hear these cases where the person is they see beings coming into their room, and then one of them they see, oh my God, it's mom, that's my mother, but the mother's been dead for years, so she feels comfortable going with them, and then she gets on the craft and she sees the mother but morphs into the being. I've heard that so many times, or they're on the craft and they think they see a dead relative just to calm that person down, um, or even use a religious figure. They're very, very religious. They will use whatever they feel they could manipulate the person into thinking that's what they really saw. It could be really complicated.
That really fascinates me because there's so many cases across history where people will tell stories that mean so much to them, but you could take the formula and put it into an abduction setting and it would still make sense. And one of the things that really, really haunts me still is I read a book called Black Elk Speaks. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's about a gentleman from the Oglala Nation. I think it's Lakota, and he grew up as the West was starting to be conquered and his lands were starting to be taken over. And he has this whole chapter called The Great Vision, where he says, like, definitively, this was not a dream. This happened. And, these figures, these 6 grandfathers were talking to him. He was taken into the clouds by these flying warriors with lightning spears and all of these things. And I want to also be very careful to say that I'm not trying to like revise this gentleman's story by saying it was an alien abduction, but it just raises the question of like, these experiences, the formula is happening over and over again. The interpretation can be different based on like you said, they'll use what a person believes in. And it just makes me wonder, like, is it the same source that's doing this? I know the word source is used a lot in this field. And, you talk about like screen memories and the ability of these beings supposedly to manipulate the person's memory. And this is one of the things that I remember John Blitch saying is like, that would be a sign of intent, right? That would be a sign of like potentially benevolence to calm someone down, or at least to make their experience less traumatic. And that's one of those things that I really hope in my lifetime we get to find out more about, because these things alone, like the ability to manipulate a person's memory, that humans can do, operating on a person, humans can do that. But like this different thing that goes on with people over time. I have so many questions that I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I know. And I'm hoping too in my lifetime that we'll have some of these questions answered. There's a lot of talk about disclosure happening, but we've been talking about disclosure for a very long time. I have never felt that disclosure is going to come through our government, but it's going to happen through the abductees and experiencers coming forward more and more, by the hundreds or thousands of, and have people realize, oh my God, these people, don't look crazy. They come from all walks of life. They have careers and families. And so it just, that's how I've always felt for several years now, that the experiencers are going to drive this, the reality of this happening.
I think I'll have a final question for you here, is that hopefully, I agree with you, as more and more people come forward, and hopefully as more and more people get trained by people such as yourself and start helping folks, what is maybe your hopes or your predictions, I guess, of what will come of this? Like, do you think, like I was just listening to an interview with Whitley Strieber, is that, he's deep into it. And one of the things he was saying is, like, once you invite the beings into your life, that's a final decision. It's like, do you think we're going to have to come to a group decision? What do you think we have to do? What do you think is going to happen?
A group decision? You mean of inviting them in, or?
Yeah, inviting them in, or just because, like, we've gotten to the point now where in modern disclosure, I think most people already take sightings in the sky seriously. And in the past 7-8 years or so, serious people saying that those are real. Not only are they real, but the government studies them. Not only does the government study them, but we might have their physical technology. And now we're getting to the point with this Jake Barber story and John Blitch coming forward, where it's like, there are beings, they've been abducting people. What do we do next? I mean, like, do we have to do something next? I don't know. Maybe it's too open of a question, but I
don't think the decision is ours. If and when it comes, full disclosure that they show themselves, we're here. We don't have control over that. That's what I feel right now. Okay. They decide when they want people to see them. They decide when they want people to take pictures of them, their craft. Because some people can take pictures, other people, they take pictures and nothing comes out. Then they choose the people they want them to see. That, here we are, they're flying around. They choose those people. Because I have so many people, that couples or people in a little group, and a couple of people see them and other people, no, I don't see anything, that sort of thing. It's just really bizarre. But I mean, I hope this happens in our lifetime, if they're, especially working with hundreds and hundreds of people over the years. But I feel that they're going to decide when it happens, and our government is not going to be able to explain it away. I think they're having a hard time now, especially after all the drone, quote unquote, drone sightings. Right. They were having a hard time explaining it away, and people were going, we know what we saw. We're not stupid. I mean, when they were being interviewed, I thought, oh my God, the government's losing control. Because they try to tell us the same story that they've been saying for decades, and people are not buying it now. They know that a normal drone can't be up in the sky for 5 hours,
Yeah.
and they're awfully noisy. So that was interesting. That happened during last November and December, and I was watching. I don't remember who was at the podium at the White House, and he was having a hard time explaining it away. And
Yeah.
so, I think it's going to happen more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I have a few analogies because you sparked them. I'm a Mr. Analogy here, but
That's okay.
it's like you're being told as a child, Santa brings the gifts.
Right.
Santa has the same handwriting as dad. And as you get older, you're like, man,
Yeah.
I was up at like 11:30 last night on Christmas Eve. Like I didn't hear anything. Like, and it's like, no, it was definitely Santa.
Yeah.
And we're getting to that point where it's like, look, I'm not stupid. I'm not 5 anymore, but the government's just trying so hard. And I think, yeah. And then the other thing too, because we talked about mantises and bugs and stuff. I'm like a wildlife photographer. I do macro photography of insects. And that's partly why I'm going off on a tangent here, so forgive me, but that's partly why I'm so interested in abductions, because I can sympathize with what it's like to be sleeping and a being that has all of the control comes in with a bright light, flips me around, does whatever it wants with me, and then leaves. And you're just like, what? And maybe it comes back, maybe it doesn't. And ants and mantises and grasshoppers, they can't decide that like, all right, we're gonna like let this big being come back, and it's gonna come back when it comes back. But they can probably decide, well, I know that this happened to Jerry, the mantis over here, and it happened to Bradley, the grasshopper over here, and we can decide that at least this is something to take seriously. And to go back to the mountain lion example, I hope that people take it seriously instead of making fun of it. And that's another big step for me, is like realizing that there are parallels to an abuse victim.
Yeah.
And to make fun of that.
Yeah.
You can make jokes about anything, but to just wholesale wipe it away, I think is just as bad as just wiping away an abuse victim.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, many, many years ago, children weren't believed that, a family member could sexually abuse them. And how sad that is that they weren't believed. And now there's, therapists and support groups and all sorts of things to help them. So it's the abduction phenomenon now is getting more attention. I mean, we still have an uphill battle, but it's better than what it was when I started. And because more and more people are coming forward to say, this happened to me. I don't care. I'm tired of living a lie. I'm tired of keeping quiet. This happened to me. And, and I think about all the military people that have come forward, because people are going to pay attention to that. Like, oh my God, that's our military. And this happened. It happened while they were, say on base. Terry Lovelace is another good example. I don't know if you contacted him, but I know.
No, but I've heard his story.
Wonderful. Just, and Mario Woods and Terry Lovelace's experiences are very similar. So when more and more people come out like that, and they will, that's when the public's going to realize, oh God. And that's why a lot of people don't want to look at this, because it's out of their box. It's like, oh, I just want to go to the baseball game and go to work and, just come back and drink my beer. But there's
Yeah.
like something else. There's something else that'll scare them. I mean, it's fear with a lot of people. And when you talk to people, that they come out with and I've learned this, with anger, like, this doesn't happen. I don't believe this. That's fear. I've learned
Yeah.
that anger is really fear, and I learned that many people that come out with the anger, something happened. Something happened that they don't want to deal with. I don't blame them. I mean, something comes into your home or can stop your car. That's big, but it's better. It's getting much better. So that's why I keep doing shows like this and then my lectures, and it's amazing. Like we were talking about the praying mantis, they're very prominent in this. I'll send you a couple um, drawings
That would be
related
great.
to the praying mantis, and I have a story. It's in my chosen book, and I'm going through a third edition of it. But it's about the double abduction of two brothers, John and Jesse Long, and that was my first double abduction case, and that's what put it on the map for me. I knew, oh my God, these people are telling the truth. But the praying mantis is really huge with the younger brother. That was his
Wow.
friend. That was his tall friend when he was brought up into the craft. And these kids were like 4 and 5 years old. So if you have, I don't know if you have the book Chosen, um, it's in that chapter. You'll be amazed. But I'll send you a couple drawings.
Yeah, and it's hard for me because I don't have an unlimited budget. I wish I did, but I would love to read that book, and maybe I can request my library. We'll get it or something. But I would love to read that book. It makes me it's just, to me, it's the most interesting thing. Like if there is a sentience or a presence that can have the same control that I do if I'm out in the wildlife photography setting.
Yeah,
And by the way, that makes me a lot more respectful to the insects now, knowing
absolutely.
what I know. But if there is something like that, to me, that's the most fascinating thing ever. I mean, that's understanding that you're on the third shelf out of 7, right? Instead of thinking you're at the top. And I can't
Exactly.
even imagine the stories that will come out when I'm an old man. People who are in the military who are going to probably wait 10, 20, 30 years before they talk about what happened to them maybe this
Yeah.
year.
People pretty much wait after they retire, and they'll come forward. So I don't forget, later on, email me your address, and I'll send you a copy of my book.
Oh,
I
really?
think it'd be really
Oh,
important for
thank
you to
you.
read it. Yeah,
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
especially the praying mantis part.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm super interested in all of them, but definitely, especially the mantis stuff. I don't even know. I don't even get that. Like, because I've always thought if a mantis was the size of a human or bigger, we would be screwed. But it seems like they bring people back.
They're about 6 to 7 feet tall. People will describe them as the insect type, grasshopper type. But when you look at, and you have had experience more than anybody I know with a praying mantis, you look at their faces, and then you look at what I'm going to send you. If this was a description from many, it's a compilation of my cases. It looks exactly like a praying mantis. And I remember one time I was outside, I was on my computer, sitting at my table, and my sister says, "Oh, one of your friends is over here." She calls it was a praying mantis. And so it was on a leaf. And so I started talking to it, and it went like this. It
Yeah.
tilted its head. Oh my God. It was listening to me. Like you said, they're very intelligent. I totally believe that. But this is exactly what people describe, and they're always present during abduction. Always. And they always seem to be in charge. But
I
they
mean, it
look
would
very
make
different than
sense
the others. They look very
more.
different than the Greys. So,
Yeah, yeah, and morphologically that makes so much sense because on Earth they're small, so a lot of people don't
yeah.
think about it, but they're like a super predator. They're just, yes, they're an insect. You can crush them with a fist easily, but
Yeah.
they're strong animals. My wife picked up my mantis at one point and it started feasting on her finger and it was not good.
Whoa.
Like it really hurt her.
Oh,
But at the same time, they have this ability to be friendly. And I remember the
yeah.
moment I got the mantis where it's like, he's got a personality.
Yeah.
He remembers me. He comes onto my hand, but he doesn't go onto other people's hands.
That's
And I
amazing. That's the
just,
first time I've ever heard anyone having one as a pet, and I've like trained it. But I believe it because of
yeah,
all the cases that describe them, and then I see them out in our yard, and for that one tilt his head, like was
yeah.
listening to me.
What's that? Huh?
Like it was, yeah. I freaked out. I said, "Oh my God!" That's the first time I'd ever seen that. But when you
Yeah.
look at them, oh my God! And you look at them and think about them being 7 foot tall. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Well, I'm glad that at least in the stories I've heard that they're not like they are as much in on Earth, the ones
yeah,
that we know, because if
yeah.
they were,
Oh my
we would
God!
be food.
Yeah,
We
I
would be food and we would be
know.
alive while we would be eaten. But what I find so amazing is that they seem to be incredibly sentient,
Yeah,
thoughtful, like the
yeah,
one with John Blitch, is
yeah.
telling him, hey, just relax, chill out so we can get our job done. And I'm like,
Exactly. Yeah,
that's
they're
what
very.
I've said that to a
Yeah,
mantis in the wild. I've said, hey, stop squirming so I can
yeah.
take a photo of you. And it's like,
Exactly.
wow,
Yeah,
wow.
you're on that other
I don't know.
side.
But hey, Yvonne Smith, I really appreciate this conversation. I really hope that anyone who's listening to this who may have had an experience or people who are very closed-minded about it can at least see that you're an objective practitioner, that you take it seriously. You don't pretend to know the answers.
Yeah.
You want to help people, and that's what it really comes down to. If we claim to care about other human beings, then we need to help them if they need help. And so I
Yeah.
just really appreciate everything you do, and
Well, thank you very much
wish you the
for
best.
having me, and don't hesitate to email me with any questions. And don't forget to send me the address you want me to send my book to your home or wherever office, and I'll send it. Don't forget.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Okay, and then let me know what you think of it too.
I absolutely will. I will read it because those abduction books, I know that I don't read very well. I read very slowly, but
Yeah.
when it comes to this field, I can't put them down.
Yep.
So I will actually read it and I'll let you know.
Okay, wonderful. It's good to hear. Well, thank you so much, and you have a blessed rest of the day.
You too. You too. Take it easy.
Thank you.